Hello everyone, I'm happy to report that I'm feeling much better. Last weekend I had some sort of cold flu situation. Body is back on and I'm happy that I eventually got better. And today we are working on backbends. And we've spoke about backbends before. The topic specifically is unlock backbends. So we're going to get into that today. A few announcements: 40% off the monthly price on a yearly plan in back to school sale. We also have our flexibility bootcamp that starts on Monday. Back to school sale, as I just mentioned. And we have our affiliate program running. So if you refer a friend, you get a kickback, and they also, there's something else I think the friend gets. But all that to say, everyone is eligible for the 40% off monthly price on a yearly plan. So definitely look into that if you're interested. Details will be through link in bio. And backbends are interesting because it seems that we might only associate one type of a shape to a backbend, and that's the bridge, where your hands and feet are on the floor and your hips push up. But there are all sorts of backbends that can be found in a variety of positions. And something that I learned when training contortion is that the cornerstone for backbend training is addressing your hip extension capacity. That's basically where the foundation for backbends are. And then it follows through with not only the low back, but with upper and middle back, or middle and upper back, I should say, and which includes the neck. Those are the main components of a backbend. And for those who are not familiar with training backbends, visually they might see something impressive, right? They might see something like this, waterfall drops, and immediately zero in on the low spine, because that is a huge portion of your spine that participates, for lack of a better word, in a backbend, right? Because whatever goes back, your spine naturally has to extend. But what people might not see and might not feel is that a good portion of that extension starts in the hip flexors. And if you don't have that hip extension, it's an awful lot of extension for your low back to take on solo. And that's where people run into problems, where they haven't properly accessed their hip flexibility. I should say mobility, because you do want to express a number, or express a high degree of tension when trying to come up from, like, let's say a bridge, or you have to express tension when you're on your way down, right? So the first order of business is to actually improve what might be limiting our low back extension, and that will be our hips. And the best way to actually highlight what that is to start at 90-90 and then push your hip forward, hinge your torso back. You want to be able to feel this hip extension and mainly the sensation front of hip pushing forward, and not so much the low spine. You want to isolate that hip extension. And if you find that you've never been able to do that, it's a great place to start, so that when you push your hips forward, you could actually feel your pelvis tilt and the actual back bend start from your hip extension and then work its way up to your low spine. That is mostly felt, I think, in a standing, excuse me, I'm better, but the cough is lingering, as it always likes to do. So if you start with legs, I like slightly turned out. There's back and forth, especially in the yoga world, where in the literature, or for lack of a better word, I guess the text for the yoga practice, they're adamant about toes forward. But that actually is not efficient for a back bend to utilize hip and back. That's for a far more strict position with toes forward, the parallel position. So in contortion, dance, and gymnastics, you could turn out the legs slightly from the hips. And even in this turned out external rotated position, you can still access a good degree of hip extension. You can feel the difference here if you place your hands on front of your hips. Just push your hip forward, not necessarily arching, but think hinge back as you push your hip forward, maybe bend the knees a little bit and try to place that stretch on the front of your hip. Once you do that, and maybe I'll show this against the wall, but you push your hip forward, hands on the hip, and then go back with your chest. And then eventually you'll be able to bring your head back. But let me bring you over to this wall so I could better show you back bend hallway time. So something I like to practice, especially when you're looking to improve or trying to acquire the skill of waterfall, meaning dropping back into a bridge, is to stand in front of the wall, legs again slightly turned out from your hip. Now you push your hip forward in order to bring the arms back behind you on the wall. And try to do that without moving your hips. You can get there with your low back, but you can get even lower if you incorporate your hip extension. And then once you start that, you can practice walking down the wall and pushing that hip forward to get lower and not necessarily have to bring in all low back solo. Now you probably noticed when reaching back without moving my hips, I was accessing some middle back. Middle back, chest, and shoulders play a huge role in back bends as well in completing that full shrimp, as Katie Breyer contortion would call it, the shrimp spine, right? Where it's just fully extended from base of spine all the way to top of neck. And for you to access that beautiful round shape will require you to also expand the abdominals, the chest, and the shoulders, because then you're going into specific skills like reaching back to grab the foot. That requires a high degree of shoulder extension, a high degree of chest opening, middle back, upper back. So it happens in pieces. And you've probably seen bendy people who don't even get into their upper or their middle or upper back, but they have insane hip extension, low back flexibility. Without even getting into this part, there is all here. That just reveals and illustrates the importance of acquiring an ample amount of hip extension range of motion. So that is just something to think about. And one of the best ways, again, is to get acquainted with your hip flexors in your lunges, as I just demonstrated. Be happy to do so again. With the 90-90 shape, one leg back and the other leg forward. Going into the pelvic tilt, you can hold that. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. You can even add a side stretch as you're pushing your hip forward. Excuse me. The upper back, I like to stretch with the blocks. So this is where you'll place one block under your shoulder blades and the second under your head. Now, if you're looking to improve your back bend, I would start advancing the stretch where your head is down, because this is ultimately mimicking what position you'll be in when extending completely in a bridge. Because sure, you could argue that your head is pretty straight when you're upside down, but when you look back to grab your foot, or you look back to just complete the line of the back bend, this is where your head will be. And it also imposes a far deeper stretch across the shoulders and across the chest. Cool. Now, specifically for the bridge, if you can't get in by waterfall, you're getting in from the floor. The issue is now we're not just calling for a range of motion from our hips, shoulders, and back, but from our wrists, because you now have to place your hands beside your head in this manner. See? And now you have to push from this extended position. If you're not used to that, or your wrists don't even have the capacity to actively enter that angle, you're probably going to have a difficult time pushing off from the floor. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, is when you push into your bridge from the back. So hands are behind you and you push up, right? This is a lot of force on your wrists if you're not used to pressing again from that extended position. And to come up requires you to place more weight forward on your hips so you can use your legs to come back up. And my back flexibility has decreased significantly because I just haven't been training contortion. But despite the fact that I lost some back flexibility but could still get up and go back down, the waterfall reveals that I pretty much am still maintaining a good amount of hip extension, as well as upper and middle back flexibility and shoulder as well. But it's all different parts. And the more you do it, the easier it will become, especially when you practice waterfalls going up and down. But because I learned how to use my hips and know to place my weight forward and place more emphasis on my legs, I'm not afraid of falling back. And that takes time to train and condition. But as I showed on the wall, that's something you could work up to by crawling your way down and pushing your hips forward at the same time. Now let me get you back on the wall because there are a few examples I want to share when it comes to targeting the upper and middle back. So if we're back here, one way I like to train shoulders is to step away from the wall and see if you can get fingertips down and start pushing the chest forward while keeping the hips back. You don't want the hips to be forward, you want the hips back, because this is now accessing a little more shoulder and a little more upper back. This is an advanced progression, this right here. Because one, you have to get your arms behind you, and if your shoulders are quite tight, you might not be able to get the fingers on the wall at all. So if we turn around, then we can face the wall, have hands on, and drop the chest forward. Now I'm looking down because this is a great way to start in getting acquainted with the shoulder stretch as well as upper back stretch. But you become more advanced when you start to look up and work your chest closer to the wall. And you could go back and forward just to ease in. But it can feel quite intense when you're looking up with chest on the wall, because now you are including cervical extension, your neck. I would start looking down first, getting that nice shoulder stretch. You can even do one arm at a time, where you spiral the armpit towards the wall, spiral towards the wall. This is a great opportunity for the chest stretch, where your arm is behind you, horizontal. You can see this side, where I now bring the armpit towards the wall and I twist away. And once you've done those, maybe you return with hands behind and see what you could achieve there. But it happens in pieces. And I think it's helpful to kind of break apart the different aspects of a back bend, tackle them separately, and then train everything to work in tandem. So you could coordinate all those efforts. But my main advice, my main recommendation is hip flexor. And I say that because that was a personal achievement of mine, where once I realized the importance of hip flexor involvement with back bends, it completely unlocked a lot of, not discomfort, but it unlocked more understanding. The anatomy of a back bend, how it functions, and how you can improve it without constantly asking the most from your low spine. So I wanted to reserve some time because I know sometimes it takes a while for questions to come through, but I want to spend these lives answering specific questions that you have on the spot as it pertains to the topic. So if there's a specific stretch that you've done but have been unsuccessful with, maybe you need another modification, that's what we're trying to figure out. And if you're watching the replay, which will be available on our main feed after this live concludes. If you're just joining, we're talking about back bends. I demonstrated a few exercises and spoke about back bend technique in general, but I'm taking this time to look for any questions specific because I can demonstrate my answer, if you will, if necessary. And again, if you're watching the replay and you see me just staring at the screen, waiting for any questions or comments about unlocking back bends. Hello. How do you stretch your back without feeling tension? That just comes from improving its overall range of motion. So if you feel tension, then you back off of that tension by just lessening the range you're imposing on your back, right? It could also mean that maybe you're not quite warmed up yet. So I felt a little bit of tension in my waterfall is because I'm doing this cold. But when I work on my upper back, my middle back, maybe get into my hip flexors a little bit, it won't feel as tight. And that comes from consistency. What are some strength training exercises you recommend for a stronger back bend? Anything that's going to impose load and mimic the actual movement. So that does mean training your body, your spine to express force in coming up, right? So gravity itself is going to be the load factor in that position just because of the shape itself, right? Gravity goes down and you're coming up against gravity. So that motion or movement in it of itself is strengthening. And of course, I've seen it done before where people hold dumbbells and they get up from a back bend, from a bridge with dumbbells. However, I would say strengthening your erector spinae comes from any type of hinge exercise and challenging the range of motion on that exercise. If you suffer from neck and lower back pain, that's something I cannot diagnose because I don't have any context. So unfortunately, I cannot answer that question. But when it comes to back to strengthening or improving the resiliency of your spine, anything hinge, but really challenging the depth. So stretching your spine, having load at the bottom, and telling your spine to come back up. But you're also including, I would argue, glutes and hamstrings as well, depending on your legs positioning. A little more complicated, but the simplest answer is just to load the shape you want to strengthen. But starting with your body weight is a good course of action. And also, doing the hinge exercises helps improve your range of motion because when you have load and you're folding forward, your hamstrings don't have a choice except to stretch. So that's why it's important to start with a load that you can control. Any other questions? Too much weight affects posture if it takes you out of the posture that you want to train. So if you're holding on to weight and you can't go down without doing something weird, then you have to lighten the weight, because if you're committing to a hinge with straight legs, then you're going to have to choose a weight that allows you to perform that specific exercise. It's kind of like squatting, right? If your goal, your aim is to go as low as possible, and you can go hips to heels, but if you have a load on your back that doesn't allow you to express force from that depth, then you have to lighten the weight so you could fully express that range of motion. What's the best stretch for the stiff back? It's not a best stretch, it's more just moving after you wake up. Anything that's going to put you in a twist, a side bend, an arch and curl, I think more so viewing it as like a movement approach versus seeking out the best stretch, because any stretch is the best when you just wake out of bed. You just want to relieve the stiffness, right? So anything that you can do that's going to gently introduce that range of motion in smaller doses in the morning will help you a great deal. What do you mean by a square? Sorry. So if your knees hurt, then you have to strengthen your knees. And you have to do so with a lighter dose of load. So mastering your own body weight is probably going to be an important exercise to practice, but walking backwards, reverse step ups, leg extensions. For all the stiffness questions, stiffness, what's the opposite of stiff? Move. So it doesn't have to be just a stretch. Any type of movement that you can do is going to help relieve that stiffness, but it has to be done throughout the day. So one time out of like 24 hours or however many hours you're working or up and about is not enough to counteract all the non-moving you've done. Any other questions? And again, if you're just joining, do not fret. You can see this live from the beginning as a reel on our main feed. So once we finish here, you can head back to the main feed of the Stretch It App account and watch it from the beginning. Pause if you like. Practice what I said and replay to your heart's content. Any more questions? Are we good to go? Is that it? No, that can't be it. That can't be it. Also, I'm playing with different times that I would like to start in the new year. I know, how dare I start talk about the new year when it's not even September yet, but it will be soon. And before you know it, it will arrive. So I'm just seeing what people's availability are and what will be best in terms of attendance. Because we want to be able to, sure, reach as many people as possible for the actual live so that you have an opportunity to ask questions and engage in a way that you can't on the app. But with that said, everyone, thank you for joining this live and taking the time. Make sure you check out our back to school sale, our flexibility boot camp that starts on Monday, and our affiliate program. So many things to check out. And I will be here next Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Again, drop us some suggestions for possible different Eastern times that we can do these on. And until then, I'll see everyone again soon. Bye.